Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Steelers meets Locked On Cowboys. Chris Carter, Marcus Mosher, getting into all the matchups. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter from Locked On Steelers here with Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys. We're going to get into this signature matchup that the NFL is loving. It's going to be on TV this Sunday. As always, you can find this show and all your Locked On shows on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Steelers or Cowboys updates all week long, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks sponsors all our Crossover Thursday episodes. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5 only at Prize Picks. Marcus Mosher, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited for this matchup. Well, kind of. We'll talk about why I'm not super excited about it. But listen, Cowboys Steelers, we only get this once every 4 years. Yeah. This has been a matchup that has historically produced some awesome games. And it also doesn't help that I live in Steelers country. So a little bit extra juice, at least for me, going into this game.
Look, growing up in Pittsburgh, I grew up in the 90s, and all the Steelers had to hold on to Super Bowl-wise was the 70s. So if you love football, your old man showed you Steelers Cowboys highlights from the 70s when they played, and then you grew up, you saw the 90s Super Bowl win when the Cowboys beat them in Super Bowl 30. So like that was it's been an iconic matchup for a long time, and
I got to ask you,
did
Neil O'Donnell throw that game?
Did he throw the game? No. Did he avoid Cordell Stewart on purpose? Yes, he did, and he deserves to go to a bad place.
There you go. Okay, that's great. You at least get that started. I think there's a lot of reasons why I'm excited about this game, but can we just do like a super superficial reason why I like this game? Do the Cowboys and Steelers have the best uniform matchup in the NFL? Like, there's something about the Cowboys and Steelers uniforms together that just make this awesome TV and great football.
Look, I like every time they meet up, it is like iconic, right? Like it's just like they do clash very well. Like the blue and the white, the black and the gold. They're just it looks so good. I still remember the 2008 one where it was like TO versus that defense, and just you're right. It is one of the greatest clashes, like as far as uniforms and styles, and again branding. Like it's just so.
Blocked that game out of my memory, by the way.
That was a crazy one. But let's get into this matchup. The Steelers defense has been very good for most of the 4 games, but last week they had a letdown game a bit, allowing 27 points to the Colts, allowed 17 points in the first 3 drives, and that a lot of people were wondering, okay, is this the real Steelers defense or was that the real Steelers defense? The Cowboys offense has been good at the times this year, but has also faltered a bit, and they were able to get over the finish line against the Giants, but obviously 20-15 against the Giants isn't the result that you want there. Who do you see being the unit that's going to have the edge in this contest, just specifically between these two sides of the ball?
Well, this is strength on strength, right? This is the Cowboys' best side of the ball, and this is Pittsburgh's best side of the ball. I lean Pittsburgh for a couple different reasons, right? The number one is I think they can stop the run. I know they didn't do it that well against the Colts, but the Colts give you a very unique look, right? They can play 11-on-11 football with Anthony Richardson. You'll notice in that game, once Flacco came in, Indy really didn't run the ball all that well. Dallas doesn't have that dimension with Dak. They had it in 2016, the only time that Dak played Pittsburgh. They don't have it now just because of his age and his injury. So this is going to turn into a Cowboys passing offense against Pittsburgh's passing defense. And I think that favors Pittsburgh because they do have some really good edge rushers, obviously including TJ Watt. They have a very good secondary. But Chris, the thing I'm curious is CeeDee Lamb. The Cowboys offense is based all around CeeDee Lamb and what he can do. Does Joey Porter Jr. travel with CeeDee Lamb into the slot where he doesn't have a lot of experience, or does Pittsburgh use more zone coverage to try to slow down CeeDee Lamb? I think zone is actually worse because Dak is so good at picking apart zones, but you might not have an option here.
That's where I'm at, Marcus, as I think that if they go to zone, and I think that actually could be a problem. Now, against the Colts, they deployed a zone defense, and their 2 touchdowns they gave up came from miscommunications in the zone defense, where guys were just going in the wrong directions and like, hey, got to clean that up. But I don't think Joey Porter travels. I also think Joey Porter Jr. hasn't had the best start to the season. He was okay for the first few games, but he had an objectively bad game last Sunday. And that is going to be something that hangs over. Now, Joey Porter, I think he's been a very mature player, and I think that he's a guy that can refocus, get things done. And he's gone up against big-name receivers before, but CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott is a unique kind of combination. And like you said, the Cowboys aren't just going to line him up in one spot and just say, hey, go win the matchup. They're going to move him everywhere, and that's where I think it's going to come down to a big matchup in this game is going to be how do the Steelers communicate about where he is, keeping the defense together while also making sure, like, hey, if he is in the slot, that means Deshaun Elliott, you're probably bumping him at the line, you're with him, and then Minka, that is where you are at. You are over top of him and can't let him get behind you.
The other thing I wanted to mention is the others for the Cowboys, right? CeeDee Lamb's going to get his targets, but can the other weapons make plays? Last week when the Steelers played the Colts, Josh Downs had an awesome game. And one of the ways that Downs had an impact was being able to make plays after the catch, right? He would catch some of these 4 and 5 yard out routes and then cut them up the field. The Cowboys will be without Brandon Cooks, their number 2 receiver. So they're already in a little bit of a hole right now. It's going to be Jalen Tolbert. It's going to be Kevontae Turpin, Jalen Brooks. Can those players make plays after the catch? If the answer is no, and this is just a better Pittsburgh Steelers tackling game, I don't see how the Cowboys win. But if they can break a couple tackles, make some plays after the catch, who knows?
I think that's definitely a part of the factor here. You talked about the Colts run game. The Cowboys, when the last time they played in Pittsburgh, Zeke Elliott was a true problem. He won the game at the end of the game. It was a fantastic contest that was. But as of right now, the rushing offense is not going for the Cowboys. They're last in total yards. I think they're 30th in yards per attempt, 22nd in touchdowns scored. What's been going on with the Cowboys run game? And is there a way that you see them that like, hey, there's something in the Steelers defense that they can definitely exploit to get it going?
Just to show you how bad the Cowboys rushing attack is. They've had 4 carries of 10 or more yards this year. 4.
Yeesh.
3 of those have come from CeeDee Lamb. Not a running back, a wide receiver, right? That's how bad the situation is.
All right, that's bad.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of Pittsburgh fans know this with, their young offensive line. The Cowboys are starting 2 rookies at left tackle and at center. They have an older right guard, Zach Martin, and it's just a unit that hasn't gelled well together. They're hoping as the season goes along, it gets better. Just hasn't been the case so far. And I think in this game, you're going to struggle because Cam Hayward is still among the absolute best run defenders in the league. Pittsburgh is going to run blitz. They're going to send a Lyndon Roberts downhill. Patrick Queen can run sideline to sideline. I think the strategy here for Dallas is only run the ball on 3rd and short, 4th and short when you need to get a yard. Because if you're running on 1st and 2nd down against this defense, you're wasting plays, and you can't afford to waste plays against Pittsburgh's defense.
Yeah, I agree. The Steelers' whole goal of their defense is to put you behind the sticks and put you in 3rd and really longs, like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 12, that kind of distance. And then that way, TJ Watt, that pass rush, they can tee off against you and they get after. And that's going to be a big factor there.
And just historically, teams that have had success against like Mike Tomlin's defense are teams that are willing to throw the ball, usually like out of empty, right? Like out of shotgun, spreading the field and hitting the middle passes, the 6-7 yard passes on 1st and 2nd down, just to avoid Pittsburgh getting you in these 2nd and long and 3rd and longs.
And also, I think you're finding the matchups that work with it. Like one thing that really frustrates the Steelers in my eyes is when you come out and it's 11 personnel, but now that running back is out wide,
right? And
so now the Steelers have to answer the question: do you run Patrick Queen out to the sideline, or do you go zone? And now that gets you your matchup where your 3rd wide receiver's on a linebacker, and you like that a lot more than per se like him versus Joey Porter Jr. or someone else. So that's definitely going to be a part of the chess match of how these 2 units go at it. We will talk more about that soon, but we also got to talk about the other side of things, and that's the Steelers offense versus the Cowboys defense. Because if you read the injuries combined between the 2 of them, it reads like a CVS receipt. We'll talk about how both of them are managing that next here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter, Marcus Mosher, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Game Time. It's fall. That means there's plenty to do everywhere out there. So there's no better place to get tickets for all your favorite live events than Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite events even easier before and getting you the best deals possible. You go on Game Time, find an event, find a band, find a team that you want to go see, and they'll make it fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. One feature that I love is called the Super Deal, where it finds you a combination of the best seat for the best price available, whether that's front row at a concert or club seats at the big game. Plus, Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price no matter what. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. We're back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys. Marcus, I could complain about the Steelers' injuries all day, but I feel like it would be kind of falling on deaf ears over in Dallas because, man, the Cowboys are going through it. Not just the star players, but the guys around who are supposed to help this defense get through that are also hurt. Run us through how serious it is in Dallas, please.
Let's start on the defensive line. So obviously Micah Parsons is not going to play in this game. It's the first game that he's ever missed due to injury in high school, college, or NFL. Their entire defense is built around Micah Parsons. So not having him is a death sentence. They just don't have anybody that can replace him. Steeler fans, I would compare this to what the Pittsburgh Steelers defense looks like without TJ Watt. Look at the record for the Steelers without TJ Watt. It's abysmal. Now, we don't know what it's going to be like for the Cowboys without Micah Parsons, but unfortunately, I got to believe it's going to be somewhat similar, but he's not the only injury. DeMarcus Lawrence, their other starting defensive end, he is out with a midfoot sprain. He's their best run defender, not going to play in this one. His backup, Sam Williams, out for the season with a torn ACL. Jeez. They are playing a 295-pound defensive tackle at defensive end this week, probably going to be lining up against Dan Moore. Their other edge rusher is probably going to be Marshawn Nealand, a second-round pick from Western Michigan this year. Played well, but still a rookie. His backup will be a guy that they signed off the Bengals practice squad on Monday. He's expected to get starter-level snaps this week. It's rough, but that's not it. In their secondary, there's more. There's more. Deron Bland, their all-pro cornerback who had 5 pick sixes last year. He's not playing this week with a foot injury. His backup, Kalen Carson, likely not going to play this week with a shoulder injury. They are decimated on defense.
That is okay. Yeah, that's pretty bad. That's you go through all the different lines there, and not like you said, not just the star power, but the guys at the different levels of defense that are supposed to keep this unit together. That is a hurt piece because going into this, there was a lot of excitement about this Cowboys defense going into this season with the star power that it has on it. And that's a big hit. Now on this Pittsburgh side of things, it's not that bad, but it's not exactly peachy either. You got right now the Steelers offensive line has been destroyed for most of the season. Troy Fautanu was looking really good according to the team. They felt like he was their second best lineman behind Isaac Seumalo. He's out for pretty much most of the year. There's a slight chance he could come back very, very late in December, maybe in January, but that's pretty much most of the year. There's Isaac Seumalo, who hasn't played yet this season because he's been injured, though they expect him back this week. But that comes at the expense of they just lost James Daniels for the season, who was PFF graded him as their best offensive lineman and one of the best linemen so far this year. So you look at that and you're like, man, that's pretty rough on the Steelers right now. But again, that doesn't compare to what the Cowboys are going on right now. I mean, it's kind of what everyone's dealing with, right? Everyone's dealing with injuries. If you're a fantasy owner, you're probably losing your mind that Christian McCaffrey's not playing every week. But I ask you this, Marcus, with that, is the advantage here to the Steelers too because of this, or is there something about the Cowboys that you think like, hey, this Steelers offense still isn't good? It isn't good yet, and there's something to capitalize on here.
I mean, this is certainly a Pittsburgh offense that's still going through the growing pains of a new offensive coordinator and a new quarterback. So I'm sure that you'll see that at times, right? And I know the running game hasn't been great yet, but Dallas gave up almost 300 yards rushing to the Ravens and almost 300 yards rushing to the Saints. And that was with DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons. I think the strategy here for Pittsburgh is to run the ball early and often, not just with Najee Harris, but with Justin Fields, they've been awful at stopping rushing quarterbacks.
Oh,
and now you take their athletes off the field with Parsons and Lawrence, attack those bigger defensive ends, make them make plays in space. I'm really concerned that the Steelers are going to be able to put together 7, 8, 9-minute drives. And this game is probably going to come down to whether the Steelers score touchdowns in the red zone or kick field goals. I just have my doubts that Dallas is going to be able to get off the field because they haven't been able to do it with Parsons and Lawrence anyways.
And so that's very much kind of the script the Steelers want to be at, right? Like right now, even with the loss last week, the Steelers are second in time of possession because they control the football. They average about 33 minutes and 13 seconds a game. Dallas ranks 29th right now at 27-03. But my thing is this, Marcus, that's what we were saying last week, because guess who ranks dead last in time of possession? The Colts. And that didn't really make much of a difference there. If you're the Cowboys, one thing I think the Steelers have struggled with in getting their run game going is like the run blitzing. They have not been able to counter it properly because for what I think, one, the young offensive line, you're going to have rookie Zach Frazier at center, rookie second-year rookie guard Mason McCormick, second-year offensive tackle Broderick Jones. I think it's going to be Mason, just based off of how I've seen things play out. Spencer Anderson will be like the first backup at guard. So you got 3 real young dudes right there, Sayamalu and Dan Moore on the left side there. And if I'm the Cowboys, the way I'm thinking is, hey, we got to see if we can confuse those guys to keep Najee Harris from getting going, because when he's running, then all of a sudden everything's easier for everybody else. And then also to keep Justin Fields from being comfortable either in the pocket or going for runs. And if you can do that, you can offset the rhythm they want to be at and give your offense plenty more chances to just, hey, keep checking out, finding a way to attack this Steelers defense and eventually hitting on the big plays.
I think that's the best way to play this as well. Like, turn this game into a shootout, because if it's a 33-30 game, I think the Cowboys have a chance to win that because they have Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, right? It's not a lot, no different than like what Pittsburgh was doing in 2017 when they had Big Ben and AB. Like, the defense wasn't up to par. So just turn games into a shootout and hope your talent on offense wins out. My issue with that is Mike Zimmer has not been a big blitzer so far. Mm-hmm. But he hasn't really needed to because they've had Micah Parsons on the field. True. They might not have a choice in this game but to send a bunch of run blitzes and dare Justin Fields to beat them with his arm. That's not to say that he can't, but I think that's probably the better strategy for Dallas. Hey, make Fields throw a tight window pass to George Pickens on Trayvon Diggs. If it's a great pass and a great catch, we'll live with that result. But what we can't do is have these 8-minute drives that result in touchdowns and keep Dak and CeeDee on the bench. That's not good for anybody.
Yeah, I agree. And that's the pace the Steelers want to play. They've been able to have longer drives. Like the Chargers, when they were going up against a team that's had a really good defense to start off the season, they were able to get some of those longer drives later in the games. Even if they don't hit them early, I think it's important for the Cowboys to do kind of what the Colts did, put the Steelers behind so that it's not about their run game late. And Justin Fields was able to get some scores last week in successive drives, but that's what you want to force the Steelers to do. If they're running the ball and feeling confident late, you're putting yourself behind the 8 ball. But if you're forcing Justin Fields to beat you late, I like those chances a lot better than the alternative there.
Yeah, and I just want to mention a couple things about this Cowboys defense. Mozzie Smith, their first-round pick from Michigan, has been awful the first 2 years of his career. However, he had the best game of his career in week 4 against the Giants.
I was going to say, I thought I saw some highlights.
Yeah, he only played 22 snaps, 23 snaps.
Okay.
But looked fantastic. Now, does that translate over to this week? If the answer is yes, I think the Cowboys will have a chance. But if he's like what we've seen in every other game, I expect the Steelers to be able to run over this Cowboys defensive line because it's frankly, it's just not good at all. Mozzie Smith is one of the players to keep an eye on. If he performs well, the Cowboys will have a chance.
Okay, that's something to look for there. I think another aspect here is the coverage. Trayvon Diggs, big name, everyone talks about, but this secondary, if there's a way for the Steelers to attack it, the Steelers, they haven't had a second receiver emerge. Calvin Austin had that one splash play against the Chargers, but rarely gets targeted. Do you think it would be prudent of the Steelers to say, hey, George Pickens, it's time for you to eat? Or do you think it would be better if the Steelers said, hey, let's divvy this up. Let's use Pat Freiermuth. Let's just kind of pepper the ball around to different guys.
I think George Pickens is going to get his regardless. I think he's going to be a big part of this offense. He's going to get those downfield targets. One of my concerns is the Cowboys safeties have looked old and slow through the first 4 games of the season. And Van Jefferson doesn't scare you. Scotty Miller doesn't scare you. Even Pat Freiermuth, like you can give up 8 to 10 yard catches to Freiermuth and you'll be okay. I know Calvin Austin hasn't had a huge role. He has made a couple plays over the last couple of weeks, but he's the guy that scares me the most when it comes to get him in the open field, let him take off, and then outrun some of these older safeties. He's the one that could break this game open for Pittsburgh if the Cowboys are trying to do everything possible to take George Pickens out of the game.
Okay, well, there you go. I think there's some matchups. We'll talk more about some more matchups on either side of the ball for both teams that I think are going to be vital in that. Next here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, Chris Carter, Marcus Mosher. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel because they are America's #1 sportsbook. There's no better place to get all your odds, ends, and lines on all the sports, whether it's NFL, NBA, which is coming right around the corner, MLB, which is now in the playoffs, all the action there, NHL's coming back soon, and college sports, and so many more. There's so many things, different things to bet on. But hey, if you want to bet on the Steelers, Cowboys, this is the best place. This is the best time to do it because this is a very close matchup FanDuel has all week long. They have maintained that the Steelers and the Steelers are 1.5 point favorites at home against the Cowboys. That's been interesting to say, and that's maintained. The money line right now sits -136 Steelers, +116 Cowboys. The over/under has actually moved up to 43.5 points. I don't know about you, Marcus. I don't want to see 40 points. What are you talking about here? Take the under. That's crazy talk around in Pittsburgh. But you can bet on all those odds, ends, and lines at FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. And right now, if you've never been on FanDuel before, new customers can take advantage of a big opportunity. All you need to do is place a $5 bet and $5 or more, and you can get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. So today, get $200 in free bets at FanDuel Sportsbook simply by being a new customer and betting $5 only on FanDuel.com. Just visit FanDuel.com today or download America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here on Crossover Thursday here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers, Marcus Mosher of Locked On Cowboys. All right, Marcus, let's talk about some matchups. And I want to toss this matchup to you to talk about how do the Cowboys plan to stymie TJ Watt. He was averaging a sack a game until the Colts game. And I know some Steelers fans will complain about holding calls. But he didn't get a sack, and the Colts had a plan. Is there something in that plan from what you saw in the game that the Cowboys can replicate to slow down TJ Watt and protect Dak Prescott?
It's got to be a team effort, right? Because Terrence Steele, the Cowboys' right tackle, isn't going to be able to do it by himself. If they leave Steele one-on-one with on an island against Watt, they're going to lose that matchup. So what I expect the Cowboys to do is to line up tight ends, fullbacks, even some wide receivers in tight splits, just to push TJ Watt out further. We saw last week against the Colts, on some of these formations, it's almost like TJ Watt's lining up as a slot corner. That's how far he's pushed out because of the formation. So I do expect the Cowboys to do that quite a bit. The other thing is it's Dak, right? We saw last week with Joe Flacco, he got rid of the ball quickly. And that makes it where it's just a little bit harder for TJ Watt to get around the edge. If your first read's not open, Dak, and your outlet's not, you got to take off and run, or you got to throw the ball away. This can't be a game where you feel comfortable sitting in the pocket, hoping things develop, because that's how a lot of these sacks happen. So it's got to be a team effort. It's got to be a good job by Mike McCarthy with formations. You need the players to actually block and at least slow Watt down, and then you need Dak to do his part and not hold on to the ball and not take sacks. I'm a firm believer that sacks are a quarterback stat. That's why most of the best quarterbacks in the league just don't take sacks, because they're getting rid of the ball. They're knowing when to clock it. Dak is generally pretty good at it, but he does struggle from that blind side. So keep an eye on that matchup.
That's certainly a big matchup here. Another matchup I want to point to is less a physical one and more of a mental one, and it involves Dak Prescott, and the guy I'm matching him up with is Patrick Queen, because as we talked about in the opening segment, the middle of the Steelers defense is where I think the Colts were able to get a lot of wins in this game, but a lot of it came because of miscommunication errors in the Steelers secondary and line, primarily in the secondary. But after the game, like you look at again the first touchdown, Josh Downs goes in motion. Joey Porter Jr. doesn't run with him. He is wide open in the end zone. The second touchdown, I think it was I forget his name right now. Ogletree. He runs a slant over the middle. Beanie Bishop is the only Steelers defender who stays in man coverage while everyone's in zone, leaves his zone wide open, catches the ball, walks into the end zone. And Patrick Queen after the game was like, hey, that's on me. I have to be the guy. I was brought here to be the quarterback of this defense. I got to make sure everyone's on the right page. And that's where I think that if you're the Cowboys and you're Dak Prescott, and part of it's also, the game plan before, but at the line of scrimmage, you get into the line of scrimmage early, you're motioning guys around, and you're trying to find those mismatches. How can I create confusion in that coverage, create some busted coverage opportunities, or simply create the matchups that I really want, like CeeDee Lamb against Beanie Bishop, CeeDee Lamb against Patrick Queen or Deshaun Elliott, and get them in spots where I can, hey, this is definitely an opportunity for us here pre-snap. And if you're Patrick Queen, how can we make sure that doesn't happen, but also how can we disguise those as saying, hey, yeah, you think that's over there, but that's actually where we want you to throw because Micah is going to be jumping into that spot soon. Marcus, I think this is some of the fun things that I do when I look at all 22. I want to see how is play structure working out? What was the plan here? Do I watch the game a third time and I'm like, okay, now I get it. How do you see this playing out in this kind of a chess match?
Yeah, so the Cowboys just don't use as much pre-snap motion as Shane Steichen and the Colts do.
Mm-hmm.
They don't play action as much either, and that's a very RPO-heavy offense over in Indianapolis. So they won't be doing that, but what they will be doing is trying to beat you by formation. So a lot of trips, bunch sets where it's really tight, and CeeDee Lamb's lined up behind like two big tight ends like Jake Ferguson and Luke Schoonmaker, where you can't see him until he's already off the line of scrimmage. Or certain formations where he's the outside receiver, but it's bunched so close that now he's got a lot of room to operate. That's how the Cowboys are going to try to beat you. It's not overly complex. It's pretty simple, but it's been pretty effective with Mike McCarthy, not only in Dallas, but in Green Bay as well. I think this is going to be a easier matchup for Pittsburgh. They're just not going to have to think as much. There's not going to be as much eye candy for Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson and Landon Roberts to watch, but it's still going to be difficult to defend.
I agree. I think. Listen, the Cowboys ain't no dummies. They're going to have a plan to try to get out there. Give me one more matchup in this game that you're looking at in particular that you think could be one that you're circling when you're watching this.
Let's go to special teams. Chris Boswell and Brandon Aubrey might be the two best kickers in the NFL right now. Brandon Aubrey's been unbelievable at kicking over 50 yards. He made a 60-yarder last week with room to spare. However, kicking in Pittsburgh on a Sunday night game is always a little bit different, right? Kicking into that open end of the stadium. I've got no doubts that Chris Boswell is probably going to nail a 50-yarder if Mike Tomlin decides to give him the opportunity to kick. That's been a little bit of an issue in the past, but who can make their long kicks? Because I do think this is going to be somewhat of a field position game. The Cowboys defense is going to need as much room as possible to operate, right? Like if they're giving the Steelers short fields, they're going to score in this one. So keep an eye on these kickers. Which coach trusts their kicker more? I know that's a nerdy answer, but Boswell and Aubrey are awesome. Watch those guys and appreciate them.
No, that is a really cool point. I don't think I've ever in all my years of Locked On seen kickers be a matchup that we've talked about. That's a very unique position like that. I like that. I'm going to flip to the other side real quick, back to the Steelers. I'm bringing up the Steelers quarterback, Justin Fields. I think, this is a matchup not just with the Cowboys, but also with the Steelers themselves, because I think one of the problems the Steelers ran into last week and a little bit against the Chargers, they just didn't have to pay for it too much, is teams are obviously run blitzing at times, and Justin Fields isn't switching out of it. Now, is that on Justin Fields, or is that just a game plan and they're saying, hey, stick to it, just let's run this, and if they call the right blitz, they call the right blitz, but we want to stick to this pace here. I think, like you were talking about, especially with the players that you're mentioning in Lawrence and Parsons, the Cowboys are going to have to get a little bit more aggressive at times, and especially if you want to stop the run. And when that happens, the Steelers are going to have to make a decision. If the run game's going, great, awesome, then you don't have to do this. But if it's going early, the Steelers need a curveball or a change-up pitch of some sort for Justin Fields to at the line, be like, all right, they're bringing that again. We have this is our counter. I haven't seen them do that a lot this year. And if they fall for, if that leads to them being a slow starter on offense again this week, and the Cowboys offense gets it, and this leads to a loss, that would be a major talking point. And then all of a sudden, that Russell Wilson conversation gets a little louder and louder and louder.
And you wonder how much they want to change the plays at the line of scrimmage with, yet again, another week with the new offensive line combination, right? You mentioned this is Ciamalo's first game back from the pec injury. Zach Frazier, I mean, he started 4 games, but still a young player. This will be Mason McCormick's first start. You don't want to try to overcomplicate things for an offensive line that's still trying to gel together, but you might not have any choice if the Cowboys are giving you looks that just aren't very favorable. Keep an eye on that. It should be a good matchup to watch.
Absolutely. Marcus, thank you so much for joining me here on Crossover Thursday. This is an awesome experience. Again, 2 big brand football teams, as Mike Tomlin called them in his Tuesday press conference, throwing down Sunday Night Football, Acrisure Stadium in Pittsburgh. Marcus, you out in Erie. So are you coming to Pittsburgh, or are you staying up north?
There's nothing I would like to do less than go sit with 70,000 Steeler fans, and then fight through traffic after a loss. So absolutely not. I will not be doing that.
Well, I'm glad I got to catch you here. Let people that can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Yeah, at Marcus_Mosher, work for a 33rd team. Also work for that website that Steeler fans hate, Pro Football Focus. Go check. Yeah, we're back in Steeler fan good graces now with the chip rate. I saw that
the chip grade, baby. Not it's like, okay, these guys know what they're talking about.
I almost made a comment when you said James Daniels is the highest graded PFF guard after 4 weeks.
I made a kind of smirk at the camera because
we don't hate all of your Steeler players. I promise. It's not like we have a meeting on Monday mornings thinking, okay, how do we make Myles Garrett look better than TJ Watt this week? I promise that doesn't happen. I promise.
I gotta admit, Marcus, there'll be some days where I'll be like, all right, what y'all do to do this? Because these don't add up. But to your point, hey, I use PFF all the time. Like I use sports information systems.
Yep.
Lots of valuable information. Marcus, thank you for all the work that you do, and thank you for joining me here on Locked On Crossover Thursday. I'm Chris Carter of Locked On Steelers. You can follow me at Carter Critiques. You can read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. You can find me here on the Locked On Podcast Network, just like you find Marcus on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Steelers or Cowboys news. We're both back Friday on our own channels, breaking down this game and all the matchups one more time. Keep it here on the Locked On Podcast Network.